I think it's wild that the first chapter of Deltarune came out like 7 years ago, and just how the discourse around this game has completely shifted. I mean, I was in a completely different place in my life when the credits of Chapter 1 rolled for the first time, and the experience was just cemented into my frontal lobe. And now after all this time, it's still stuck there, and I presume it will remain there for like the next 1,000 years or something like that. It is crazy how much discussion of this game there is online. There are so many theories and debates and just like guesses as to where the story is headed and what's going to happen to all of our favorite characters and what could be the final panel of the prophecy and who is the knight and where will chapter 5 take place. Will it be Flower King? Probably. And, what are the shadow crystals for? How does Gaster fit into all this? And while I could go on forever with all this, and there's already a bunch of really weird and interesting ideas about what the future of this game is, and some really cool content out there as to what it could be, I don't think I have anything to add to that. What I can add is a discussion of a character who has already had some time in the spotlight, and a character who I genuinely think is really fun and enjoyable for the time that they were relevant. It's probably in the thumbnail of the video, Chaos King. I really like Chaos King. That's going to be the whole video. It's pretty uncontroversial to say that, Toby Fox writes fantastic characters. It's really what his narratives are built on, is that you're going to get attached to these characters. And so, for example, in Undertale, everyone from the smallest frogget all the way up to the King of Monsters is really likable and pronounced in their characterization. This does mean, though, that Undertale, as a result, doesn't really have a villain. It just has antagonists who you will eventually befriend. Flowey does initially slot into that role, but by the true pacifist ending, he ends up committing one of the biggest acts of heroism in the game as Asriel. The only room for villains in the game is the player themselves on a genocide run, and Chara, who's more of a manifestation of our actions on a genocide run, rather than a character in their own right. Fast forward to Deltarune, and we see something similar start to play out. From the moment that we meet Susie, it's immediately clear that we're going to befriend her eventually. And in many ways, that is the narrative arc for Chapter 1. Susie needs to learn that violence is not always the answer. From there, most every antagonist is handled in a similar fashion. Lancer is another extremely obvious enemy who we will eventually befriend. Rules Card is a comedic antagonist who flip-flops on his allegiance depending on what will get the most laughs out of the audience, and Jevil is just a little freak. In one way or another, they all follow the Undertale formula. In fact, I think they follow it stronger than Undertale's characters, because, unlike Undertale's characters, they will end up befriending you no matter what you do. All of the characters in the first chapter join you whether you fight or use mercy. And that really sets the Chaos King to be the first proper villain in the game. Moreover, he feels like he's been designed to really emphasize the fact that he's a villain in contrast with all of Toby Fox's other characters. Both violence and pacifism fail to sway him to your side, and in fact, he plays on that expectation, pretending that he will join your side in order to lower the party's defenses. I think that's really cool, in comparison to every other Toby Fox character who immediately concedes once you have a little friendship pep talk with them. In fact, I like the fact that he doesn't concede at all, and even though you completely beat him in future chapters thus far, he has stayed an antagonist. I think all of these factors put him in contrast with, at the very least, the antagonists from the following two chapters. In Chapter 2, Birdly and Queen are both redeemed, Spampton is just a little freak like Jevil, and, we're the villain in the Snowgrave route, so it's similar to the Genocide run. And in Chapter 3, Tenna doesn't even really feel like an antagonist. He feels like he's just primed to be like a wacky roommate from the start. Eram is a bit of a weird one. I think we're safe to put them in the little freak category as well, and I think that kind of just leaves the Knight and the Titans as the only true villains that we have so far in Deltarune. I do love the Knight for a similar reason. In Chapter 4 in particular, I think that the Knight is a fantastic antagonist, but this video is about the Chaos King, so I'm going to focus on the Chaos King. I think that another aspect of the Chaos King that I really enjoy is his resemblance, but also his subversion to another Toby Fox character, that being Asgore. Specifically Asgore in Undertale, he doesn't really bear any resemblance to Asgore in Deltarune aside from being divorced. A lot of the time in Undertale, before we meet him, we hear about Asgore. We hear about him much more than we actually spend time with him on any given playthrough, and every character has their own take on him. Toriel tells us that he will kill us. Papyrus says that he's a big fuzzy pushover who will be happy to let us pass by if we ask nicely. Undyne is confident that we'll be able to work out some kind of agreement to let us pass, and Alphys knows that we need to fight him if we want to pass. In a strange way, all of these things kind of turn out to be true about him, and I think that is where his real character strength lies. It's really interesting that we get so many different opinions on one character before meeting them, and having all of those turn out to be true, despite the fact that they're very different. The Chaos King makes use of this idea too, in a different way. Our primary source of information is through my Goat Lancer. We get an impression that the king is this very stern father figure who Lancer is eager to impress, and just generally that he's not the best of parents, going off the fact that it seems that Rule spends more time with Lancer than he does. This does build up an imposing image of a foe that we will have to use force to defeat, and this idea then gets flipped on its head when Lancer asks Susie not to kill his dad. And I think that that's really cool, because now it feels like the onus is on us as the player, and also on our protagonists, that we have to pass this roadblock, that we have to find some way to make peace with him. I think it's really interesting that in this instance of alluding to a future chapter, there isn't really any ambiguity the same way that there was with Asgore. Most people have a pretty clear idea at this point that the Chaos King is going to be a bad guy, but now there is this extra layer of anticipation as we have to kind of spare a tyrant that we have heard nothing but bad things about. Most of the residents of this dark world seem to have a very negative opinion of him, and that kind of feeds into our idea that this is someone who we are going to have a really tough time getting past. This is in opposition to Asgore and Undertale, who we are told is a lovely person, but we are going to have no choice but to kill. And I just think that that's a really cool inversion of a previous character concept. And it leaves a player who has just come off Undertale primed to think that there will be some way to redeem him. Especially at the point that it comes into Susie's arc, it feels like that is her final challenge. While Asgore Undertale is the character who he evokes the most of, I think that there are also shades of contrast with your two companion characters in him. Like Ralsei, he is a ruler of a dark world, and he recognizes the importance of the Lightners appearing in his world. But unlike Ralsei, he contrasts by the fact that he is not a benevolent ruler. He's a tyrant who is eager to resort to violence, and he doesn't view the Lightners as higher beings the way that Ralsei does, but rather as foes to be defeated and conquered. With Susie, he's the culmination of her Chapter 1 character arc. She has spent the latter portion of the game learning the value of mercy, and now she has to put those newly learned values up against a character who holds the philosophy that she had at the start of the chapter. This is the moment where she has to overcome what she was. I think that it's really cool that this one character is able to act as a foil for our two companions in a way that really highlights them as characters so early on into this story. I think that it's really cool. I think that as time goes by, the narrative of Deltarune has sort of rendered the Chaos King more and more inert, as his role has kind of slowly been filled by both Carol and the Knight. It's definitely getting easier to lose appreciation from him in the sea of other characters who we've been introduced to since, especially given that there are plenty of characters who've had more screen time than him at this point. That being said, I still have a lot of fondness for the character, and the general villainousness that he embodies as a character I feel is very unique in the Toby Fox cast of characters. And I think that it makes him very likable and pretty cool as one of the few characters that we're actually supposed to dislike, and is just unapologetically evil and an over-the-top villain. If you enjoyed, please like or let me know in the comments that you liked it, or subscribe, or all of those. If people like this, I might just do a video on a different character from the Toby Fox Expanded Universe. And if people don't like it, I might do that anyway. Who knows?
Bye-bye!